The winds of Yanbei started to feel colder as winter approached once again. At this very moment, there was coincidentally a group of people who were about to disembark from Xianyang port. A few weary men led a few horses and quietly reported, "Message from home." No one knew that the young master is absent. The seventh master informed that young master could proceed with his own business, and as long as you return within the next 10 days, all will be well. The man in a violet outfit frowned ever so slightly, and with his crimson-red lips, his eyes were like a bottomless well that no one could see through. Mounting a horse in a swift motion, his features vaguely showed some signs of being weathered by the elements. This trip to Tang Jing is merely 3 days if we take the shortcut. The problem is that there will be no major cities along the way, and it will be disastrous if anything goes wrong. We have no time. Let us take the shortcut. A servant turned around and looking at the man in violet, he suggested, "Master, shall we prepare a carriage? You have not slept well for a few days." "That would be unnecessary." The man shook his head before solemnly asking, "Is there any news from Tang Jing?" After Lady Chu defeated Zhan Ziyu, the entire court was brought to peace. There were merely some minor disagreements over who should watch over the young emperor. This subordinate feels that Lady Chu might end up following through the plot of one of them. "She dares to?" The man snorted, his expression looking rather gloomy. "I'd like to see who dares to do that." The crowd followed this man's lead and all mounted their horses. In the swift galloping of the horses, they quickly disappeared on the ancient roads of Xianyang. Before long, they were out of the city, and through the west gate, they took a small path. After such a long parting, everything had changed, and even the people were no more. Time flies. In the blink of an eye, tens of years had passed. Suddenly, she was no longer that young girl who radiated childishness, and he was no longer that stubborn young man. Time had once again drew countless boundaries between them, originating from family, country, love, war, separation. But ultimately, their relationship was like an endless thread. No matter how hard destiny tried to pull, they remained tied together by that red string. Wind bellowed from the distant Yanbei, caressing the vast territories of the Wei Empire, passing by the still warm Liang Empire, before turning into the blossoming flowers in the Song Empire, and finally reaching the unending waves of the ocean in the east, vanishing into the waves. The road is still long, and we may face with even more change. Are you afraid? I am not. Remember, I am waiting for you. The night was so cold, with only moonlight as illumination. The long stretch of the ancient dirt road was dimly lit up. The fragments of memories from the past had ultimately still been filtered by the blood and war, washing away the initial sense of happiness and hope. Calmness remained to logically divide the past emotions and the best course of action for the current situation. It is a pity. Ultimately, I do not believe in destiny. As the horse hooves rumbled, the night seemed to be everlasting. The Liang capital that he had not seen for so long was now right before his eyes. The news that General Shuli was about to be bestowed the title of a consort was spread throughout the entire Liang Empire in merely one night. Shinan, Dianxi, Yuelin, Yunmo, and other areas sounded out protests in unity. Particularly strong was the resistance from the southern regions. King of Jinggan, King of Duanqing, and Duke Huayang had raised flags of rebellion in quick succession. All these forces, who had been lying low during the rebellion of the King of Luo and absent during the rule of the Zhan siblings, had suddenly all jumped out, and with the slogan, "Remove the Witch," they led a total of over 180,000 soldiers, and headed off to the Liang Jiuyi capital. Along the way, officials had all granted instant access to their forces. Sun Di seemed to have predicted this situation long ago and had already situated 200,000 soldiers from the eastern regions. Led by Xu Su, they guarded Han Shui River. 100,000 soldiers from the Wolf Army firmly garrisoned the capital, and guards were raised on all checkpoints. The capital was now armed to the teeth, and the neat rows of blades and spearheads formed an ocean that seemed ready to devour the imminent enemies from the south. All was ready, with only the ceremony left to take place 3 days later. In the autumn wind, as there was the need to prepare for the ceremony at the Phoenix Stand, the entire city fell into martial law, and the usually bustling roads were now completely devoid of life. The only thing that still resembled life was the autumn leaves that fluttered down from the sycamore trees that seemed like butterflies frolicking in the flowers. In the residence of Sun Di, an eunuch wearing the clothes of a servant knelt on the floor, as he reported in with the sharp voice that was unique to eunuchs. Master Chu had an argument with Makang and alarmed the emperor and Princess Xiao. At the end, this servant heard that Master Chu made a promise not to leave the Liang Empire. Sun Di flicked an eyebrow and asked, "Are you sure?" "I am very sure." Makang was crying loudly, and the young emperor had drawn the sword. Master Chu had even burned the letter from the Wei Marshal. When did Makang leave? Before the sky was bright, she had already left, and that young man called Pingan escorted her out. Master Chu said that she was returning to Suifu City. Sun Di nodded. After a long while, he stated, "Her departure is a good thing. She would only obstruct things by staying here." The man's feature remained emotionless. He took out 2 gold ingots and informed, "Go and continue. I will treat you well." "It is my honor, Master Sun." After the servant left, Sun Di called in one of his bodyguards. After thinking for a while, he slowly said, "Leave immediately and search for Master Chu's maidservant Makang. If she is returning to Suifu City, help escort her. If she decides to go anywhere else, you know what to do." The man immediately said, "This subordinate understands." Just like that, he turned and walked out. Before long, there was a horse crying, and it galloped off into the distance. Pushing open the window, Sun Di could only see the corner of the crescent moon. At first glance, it looked like the brow of a lady. May all be well. Peace continued for the next 2 days. The entire court sank into silence. With the exception of a few archivists, none had any comments. The officials were either pressured by Sun Di or held a fear for Chu Qiao, who still commanded a huge force. As for those few who resisted the strongest, Sun Di originally intended to handle them himself, but before he could act, the Zhuli army had already thrown them into jail. Upon finding out, Sun Di felt a tad worried. Although these people were stubborn, they were ultimately those who were the most loyal to the Liang Empire. Considering the loyalty of Zhuli army to Chu Qiao, who knew if they would be mistreated, he had personally headed into the palace to speak to this lady who would supposedly watch over this empire. He knew that his little ploys had been detected to some extent by Chu Qiao, and now did not dare to enrage her too much. With that, he could only discreetly inform the jail guards to take care of those old officials. This night was destined to be a sleepless night, as the next day was the official ceremony for Chu Qiao to be given the title, and this was the first time since the beginning of the Liang Empire that they had to marry someone to a deceased emperor. The ceremonial department had rushed day and night to ensure that all the decorations were suitable and that the Phoenix Stand could be completed. At this moment, countless officials sat around plotting for themselves. No one knew where the Liang Empire would head to, and all noble families were focused on the direction that this woman, who had close ties with so many people of power, would direct this empire toward. Would she ultimately be a loyal subordinate or a greedy tyrant? Would she leave society as it was, or would she set up a dictatorship like Yan Bei? No one could tell. After the next day, would the Liang Empire still be led by the Xiao family? That was the exact question that most people had that night.